This is the house of Imogen Robinson Parker. Ms. Robinson Parker is now 89 years old and lived in the house for much of her life until her stroke a decade ago. She inherited this lovely dwelling when her mother, Mrs. Ambrosia Camille Robinson Sheffield, passed. Mrs. Robinson Parker only has one heir, her granddaughter, also Ambrosia, who has since become sole heir-to-be of the estate. This was a title bestowed on her when her mother, Emily, was tragically struck by lightning whilst golfing in the Midlands one very stormy afternoon. Ambrosia was 16 at the time and had then made the home her abode, owing to the fact that grandmother Imogen had, after the stroke, been confined to a special needs care facility. And after all, someone had to live here. Now, Ambrosia has since married Howard Plunkett Higgins, resulting in her flaunting an unfortunate Robinson Plunkett Higgins triple barrel. Ambrosia soon gave birth to her one and only little Camille, who now sports the honour of being the 6th Robinson daughter not to have a brother to carry forward the Robinson heritage. Camille, however, at the tender age of 8, vows that this will be the end of the wretched Robinson name fusion mashups. She will not have a double-barrel surname. In fact, she's quite sure that she will marry a Smith. And at this point, Camille is not bothered that she has no brother, seeing as that makes her sole heir when one day Ambrosia moves on to another life. Which, after that brief introduction, brings us to the actual matter we're documenting today, that of heritage. Ambrosia is currently sole heir-to-be of this fantastic estate. And as I said, one day, it'll fall into the able hands of her spirited little lass, Camille. This is Webster, by the way. Webster is not a dictionary, he is in fact the family butler and has been for 65 years. Now, in law, an heir is a person who is entitled to receive a share of the deceased's property, subject to the rules of inheritance in the jurisdiction, where the deceased died or owned property at the time of death. In other words, Ambrosia does not become an heir before Miss Robinson Parker kicks the bucket, and Camille does not become an heir before Ambrosia checks out, since the exact identity of the persons entitled to inherit is determined only at the time of death. If Miss Robinson Parker leaves this earth today, is this exact person at this exact point in time truly Ambrosia Robinson Plunkett Higgins, or is she an imposter? And of course, she has to be well aware of her identity if she is to claim her inheritance. Now, in modern law, the terms inheritance and heir refer exclusively to succession to property by descent from a deceased dying intestate. Takers in property succeeded to under a will are generally termed beneficiaries. For example, if Miss Robinson Parker actually had a will, she may have decided to bequeath her entire estate to Webster. But there would have been little sense in that, because in all honesty, who would have thought that Webster would have outlived her? Just as nobody thought that Webster would outlive Margaret, resulting in him now having to double up as butler and housekeeper. But now that we understand the concept of heritage, where an individual can receive an entire estate by just correctly declaring his or her identity, could we for one moment consider the irony of how someone can invest an entire lifetime to erect paper houses that have absolutely no foundation, no eternal value, and no future, when in fact an inheritance is on offer for free, pour libre? And then on top of that, these persons actually think their paper house constructions amount to something significant. There is a precious inheritance on offer due to your legal position as heir-to-be and the favour of the deceased. He or she could have disqualified you by means of a will, but they hadn't. And instead of just taking up your role as heir, you rather work endlessly to prove that you are worthy and to actually look good in the eyes of others. And to be able to look back and say, look what I've established. But maybe your paper houses are not that smart after all. The last thing to understand is that inheritance is not a covenant. A covenant or agreement spells out what both parties have to do and not do. Whether you inherit interstate or by means of a will or testament, you have no part in a unilateral stipulation that is employed. When Ms. Robinson Parker dies, Ambrosia becomes the sole heir because of interstate regulations. She could also have received this by means of a will if Ms. Robinson Parker had stipulated it thus. Both alternatives do not make out a covenant, a deal, a do this and you get that. In closing, tragically, thousands of individuals walk this earth building paper castles, doing their best to bring their side of the deal, when in fact they only need to breathe, to be there, show their identity, and believe they are who they are. All they need to do is receive what they have already inherited in Christ.